6 billion people, innumerable cultures and countless ideas. In this world of unrest, yearning and horror, there's a constant zeal to form a better planet. As the words of the spin doctors leave a numbness within those searching for the truth, come with us and observe Globespin. Welcome to Globespin. In this episode's feature story, we look at the appalling number of children in Africa and Latin America denied an education by being forced into work. The small English country town of Bury St Edmunds wins an international environmental contest. We visit the fascinating touring exhibition of little-known French artist JeanSimon Chardon. We look at the people behind the BBC's popular 24-hour Arabic service on the internet. Enthusiastic young volunteers help indigenous Chileans and the country's national parks. We look at the unlikely yet devastating effect of floods in the desert nation of Yemen. And we look at the work of the English Heritage Society in restoring England's cathedrals to their former glory. All that and much more in this edition of Globespin. The idyllic country house near Nairobi, Kenya, where the Danish author Karen Blixen wrote her famous memoir, Out of Africa. It depicts an African benign and idyllic, where children thought of nothing but to plant, raise and harvest coffee alongside their parents and friends, and where they too seemed perfectly happy. But for a child in the stone quarries of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, the picture is different. The International Labour Organization estimates that close to 80 million children are at work in Africa today, work that is often hazardous and dangerous to health. Africa has more children working than anywhere else in the world, over 40% according to an ILO report. No one is too young to work, and no task is too dangerous. In sweatshops, plantations, mines and quarries, the army of child workers continues to grow. The majority of children are put to work on farms or in households as domestic help. Few are able to continue their schooling or even bother to enroll. Any effort to reduce the number of working children face tough resistance. A wake-up call was sounded at a recent ILO meeting in Kampala, Uganda, to draw attention to the alarming rise in the numbers of children at work in Africa. Where child labour is on the rise, child abuse and exploitation almost certainly are present as well. Child labour has cultural origins, but there is no excuse for child prostitution, child pornography, and children being forced into jobs that are hazardous and a danger to health. Like prisoners sentenced to a life of hard labour, these boys trudge towards the quarries of Lima and Peru. 10 hours of back-breaking work, a litany of hammer against stone, a heavy cross to bear when you're barely 15. Boys as young as 7 come to quarries all over Latin America. They come for the money. They come to break stone into gravel for houses they will never live in and for roads they will never travel. Sudden rock slides, a fall from a high cliff. These and other hazards of the quarry are well known to the boys. Dangers lurk in the fires that burn day and night. Smoke fills the air and coats their lungs with a toxic tar of carcinogens such as asbestos. Carrying loads of the stone deform a child's bones before they have time to mature. They know the hazards, but they also know that walking away from them will not put food on the family table. Children's play reduced to hard labour, a tragedy suffered by millions of Latin American children. They're farm workers, they're prostitutes, they're quarry workers and brickmakers. They are as young as 6 years and often an important breadwinner for the family. A report by the International Labour Organization cites that 1 child in 5 in Latin America is a labourer, and like Africa, their numbers are growing as few real jobs are being created by the business sector. Fight poverty with education. Many Latin American children do go to school and work at the same time. Tired from long work days and often absent from classes, many student workers fail at school. But the choice between a brick and a book is a tough one to make for any parents when the choice is whether or not to have a loaf of bread on the table. A poorly funded, indifferent school system offers little advantage over the immediate gain of a child earning money in the brickyard. Poverty is not the only cause. There's a lack of political will to provide education. The ILO has called on regional governments in Latin America to reform their schools and lead these children away from the quarries and back to the classrooms. Getting rid of the grossest forms of exploitation requires urgent international action before too many children's lives are chipped away to dust. Karen Blixen let the game paths of Africa lead her to a place which she found to be perfectly happy. An African child walks those same paths today, but like so many other children around the world, those idyllic paths lead to a quarry, a mine, any place but a place to be happy. The Arabic service is the oldest of the BBC's foreign language radio services, but it's in the forefront of the BBC's venture into the world of internet broadcasting. Since last November, listeners have been able to log on to the Arabic service website for constantly updated news as well as radio and video output. It's proving popular, especially in Saudi Arabia, with world user numbers quadrupling since the launch. As well as bringing the voice of the BBC to a wider and particularly a younger audience, the website has the advantage of being difficult to censor. This is an important safeguard in a region where most broadcasting is still heavily state-controlled.
More than 40 websites, and they all belong to the BBC World Service.
In the Middle East, the BBC is facing keen competition for listeners from the growing number of satellite TV channels. As well as the news website, the Arabic service has launched a 4-hour breakfast news program to win a bigger, earlier morning audience. Demands for better quality reception has prompted the BBC to change from shortwave reception. From this week, 12 million listeners in the Sudan will be able to get the BBC on FM, and plans are advanced to bring the voice of the BBC on high-quality FM to listeners throughout the Arab world. The Republic of Yemen, in the southwestern corner of the Arabian Peninsula, was recently hit by a natural disaster which had far-reaching consequences for the economic and social development of the country. In June last year, the country was hit by severe rainfalls, causing flash floods in several regions of the country, causing losses exceeding $1.2 billion. Hundreds of thousands were affected, precious farmland was lost, and infrastructure damaged. To cope with this catastrophe, the government of Yemen issued an international appeal for emergency relief, requesting drinking water, food, medical care and shelter for the people in affected areas. The response was immediate, raising $15 million in 2 months. One of the hardest hit areas was the historic Marib region. Homes were destroyed, irrigation canals and communication lines damaged. Many families were left without shelter and lost everything. One family still suffering from the impact of the disaster is that of Ahmed Abdirman Al-Qadiri. Father of 17 children, his house is still a heap of rubble. He lost all he owns, including his livestock. $200 million is still needed for protection and rehabilitation. Recently, the United Nations Development Programme, the Dutch government and the World Bank convened a donors meeting in Sana'a. There, the government presented a detailed assessment of the situation and a 5-year development plan. The environmental, economic and social impact of the floods has been enormous. Arable and natural land were eroded or affected by sedimentation. In the Shibwa district, many wadis and ravines had their courses changed, washing away precious soil. The volume of sedimentation trapped in the Marib Dam has considerably decreased its storage capacity. As one of the least developed countries, Yemen is striving to achieve economic and social development, but its efforts have been seriously set back. International assistance is necessary for Yemen to recover from the present disaster and protect itself against similar disasters in the future. At one of those must-see exhibitions at London's Royal Academy, JeanSimon Chardon, an illiterate 18th century artist who shunned ambition and the fashionable to paint humble domestic objects and turn them into visual poetry. He preferred everyday subjects, like this scullery made at the same time, capturing a moment of stillness in the everyday life of a simple Parisian household. This bowl of wild strawberries glows with all the timeless intensity of the 17th century Dutch masterpiece. And these everyday objects have a poetry of their own. According to Marcel Proust, Chardon taught us to find the things themselves beautiful to behold. He had an enormous influence on French painters. This still life could be straight out of Cézanne. This vase of flowers is on loan from Scotland's National Gallery in Edinburgh. Artists like Monet, Gauguin and Van Gogh adored Chardon. His appeal is also linked to the essential Frenchness. The aesthetic of the everyday made him a cult figure, albeit mainly in France, but the current travelling exhibition will introduce him to a wider audience. Even his portraits have an intimacy and stillness. A portrait of a jeweller's son watching a top. Or this wonderful study of a little girl with a shuttlecock. The exhibition, celebrating the 300th anniversary of the artist's birth, will tour England before going to New York. The splendour of England's cathedrals. Standing at the centre of the country's most historically important towns and housing a wealth of art and culture, these magnificent structures continue to draw crowds. Canterbury Cathedral has been a place of worship since before 597, when St. Augustine became the first archbishop. Throughout the Middle Ages, pilgrims from all over Europe came to Canterbury to worship at the shrine of the murdered archbishop, Thomas à Becket. As a result, the cathedral, with its magnificent structure of French limestone, prospered. Today, the cost of maintaining such a building is enormous. Canterbury has spent over $20 million on different problems over the last 3 decades. Acid attack from lichens is the most obvious, but more insidious is the black stain of years of pollution from charcoal fires and nearby gasworks. The stonework is affected because it's porous, absorbing and releasing moisture. Cleaning reveals a multitude of sins. The masonry has been weakened by the introduction of Portland cement mortar in the mid-Victorian era. Ironically, it was considered a strong weathering material that would strengthen the building. In fact, it's so dense, moisture can't escape through the joint and is forced to seep through the stone surface, exacerbating the acid problem. As much of the cement mortar as possible is raked out and replaced with a lime mortar. New stones are fixed with the same material. The lime products which have been reintroduced will migrate through the stone and strengthen it. It will mean losing these beautiful hand-carved gargoyles. No amount of restoration could adequately preserve them, but they will be replaced with something equally charming. The cathedral's team of stonemasons are hand-working the candle tower stones and carving new gargoyles. Like the original masons, they are given free rein on the decorations. It's a labour of love for these masons. Many of them have been working on Canterbury Cathedral for 2 decades. The building has been developing and changing since the first stone was laid in 597, and Canterbury is fortunate enough to be able to fund its works programs through donations invested from a 1970s appeal. Other cathedrals have not been so lucky. Restoration is costly because of the scarcity of quality materials and expertise required, and there's a limit to the amount of money a congregation can raise from cake stalls and parish functions. In the case of Ely, north of Cambridge, the Romanesque cathedral was in serious need of repair in 1986. Restoration work commenced with not a penny in the coffers. Parish appeals raised $7 million, but a year later, the cathedral was hit by a hurricane, causing additional damage, especially to stained glass windows. The English Heritage Society has come to the rescue of many cathedrals, including Ely, with its Cathedrals Grant Scheme totalling $124 million. Ely has replaced vast amounts of wood, glass, stone and lead, and is planning a Thanksgiving banquet this summer to celebrate being the first cathedral to complete its extensive works under the scheme. Part of Salisbury Cathedral's $800,000 grant is going on this 16th century stained glass window being restored at Canterbury. Victorian restorers leaded over cracks, even if they disfigured the artwork. Today, the false leads are removed, cracks cleaned and modern adhesive syringed into the gap. By lining up the glass, the crack will be almost invisible. Today's approach to restoration is preservation of the original rather than intervention. Salisbury has ordered no repairs, just cleaning, as it wants to preserve the imperfect work of former artisans as part of the window's history. Built on a Benedictine monastery in 178 to commemorate Britain's first Christian martyr, St Albans Cathedral today contains one of the country's earliest vaulted wooden ceilings. English heritage money has restored its structure and painted ceiling. These wall paintings have suffered the misguided restoration of last century, which ultimately caused their greater deterioration. While these paintings won't look any brighter, they will be cleaner, more stable and in better condition. With such treasures to preserve, works programs carry on and English Heritage will continue its support, handing out a further $5 million for the next few years. English Heritage says the grant scheme has breathed new life into England's 61 cathedrals. As major repairs near completion, many are in better condition now than ever. Works on such a grand scale won't be necessary for another 100 years, ensuring these awe-inspiring buildings remain important as places of worship, serve as museums and galleries, and thrive as the nerve centres of communities that they were always intended to be. Known as the Green Oscars, hopefuls from 30 countries across the world gathered in the Japanese city of Hamamatsu to take part in the world's top environmental competition. This year, it was the small English country town of Bury Street, Edmonds, in Suffolk, which walked away with the prize for the best small town. They said the best thing about the contest was learning just how much more they could achieve. The award for the best environmentally sensitive practices, including reducing household waste and cutting car traffic, went to the large London city borough of Wandsworth. The host city of Hamamatsu won the event last year. Devastated by American bombing during the Second World War, only 3 of its local platanus trees were left standing. But these were revived by residents and became a symbol of their determination to rebuild their city. The judges are looking for evidence of saving precious heritage, restricting chemical pollution, inventive recycling schemes, and a commitment to the environment at a grassroots level. The next competition will be held in Washington, D.C. in the United States in November. The British youth charity Rally International has been working in remote regions of Chile for the last 15 years. Now it's been announced that staff from London's Natural History Museum and their Chilean counterparts will team up in a joint project with Rally International. The European Commission has made available $800,000 for a program involving Chile's national parks. Rally volunteers work on a community centre for Mapuche Indians at Racapangu Chico, a remote area about 1,500 miles south of Santiago. The Mapuche are Chile's largest surviving group of indigenous people and have lived in what are now Chile's national parks for centuries. The local people appreciate the building of this centre at Huanalihuan, a remote rural community of Mapuche. The project, built with the financial help of the local government and a Mapuche charity, will be used as a meeting place for the community. It's projects like this which have established Rally International as an effective contributing organisation. The team will also conduct a major survey of plants and animals in Chile. The findings will be used to help local people learn how to protect and sustain their own environment. That brings us to the end of this edition. Thank you for travelling with us, and we look forward to your company in the next Globespin.